A desert planet with twin suns.
Why do I sense we've picked up another pathetic life form?
Use my knowledge. Much to learn. You still have.
Welcome back to Twin Sun Talks, folks. I'm your host, Jonah Liu. Thank you so much for listening. And welcome to this month's edition of The Ability to Speak Does Not Make You Intelligent.
The ability to speak does not make you intelligent.
On this month is my good friend Caleb Oliphant. We tried to get him on last month and didn't quite work out. So we're very happy to have him on. Again, we appreciate him coming back to re-record. So Caleb, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to do this, even though it's the second time. I learned a lot from the first time, so
yeah,
I'm excited.
Hey, man. Excited to have you back. So I've already heard your profile, but our listeners haven't. So if you could, since this is your first official time on, give us your favorite character, your favorite movie, your favorite show, and then if you could have a lightsaber, what color would it be?
Okay. I'll start with my favorite character. I'd say my favorite character is Qui-Gon Jinn.
Awesome.
For surface level reasons, just because he's got a green lightsaber, and that's pretty neat. And he's really cool, the trainer of Obi-Wan. His ideology is something I really like. I like that he's like a Jedi who he follows the light side of the Force, but he also is like not bought into the Jedi orders like corruptness. Like he's kind of just like able to like follow the light side of the Force without having to like be a part of the institutional Jedi orders sketchy dealings. So overall I just think he's like a really good mentor for Obi-Wan, and
definitely.
So I like him for that.
Awesome. Yeah, no, love
movies. Yeah, movies and TV shows. Even though we're on for Rebels right now, I will say that my favorite of the TV shows is The Mandalorian. Solid. I think that it's really impressive that among like a Star Wars, the culture of Star Wars is very much like looking back on the good old days. It's like The Mandalorian is one of the few things that's like new out of Star Wars that everyone agrees is just like really good. And so it's really impressive that they were able to do that. Favorite movie, going back to like the good old days, I really like A New Hope. It's just the classic Star Wars. It's like not the most complicated plot, but it's just got, you can really see how like it became like such a global phenomenon through just like its effects, and it's just like iconicness, and it's just a wonderful story about light versus dark. So
most definitely, dude, I love A New Hope so much. Completely agree. And then lightsaber color.
As mentioned, I've got two answers to this. My easy answer is green. I just like a green lightsaber. Green is my favorite color. But I also have my like radical choice. If you don't mind me sharing, it's
Go for it.
We're in Rebels, right? In Rebels, the Inquisitors have these like spinning lightsaber hilts that have, it's like a double-sided lightsaber that spins kind of like a helicopter blades. Yeah. And the idea that I've always had is like kind of like Two-Face and Batman, where once I defeat an opponent, I'll like spin the Inquisitor blades, and if the red side ends up top, then I will kill him, and if the blue side lands on top, I'll let him stay alive. I always thought that'd be a fun character in Star Wars.
That's a great idea. No, that'd be super cool. And I think last time we talked about, I brought up, and this is just what it just automatically makes me think of, is there is a lightsaber that like it's a two-sided lightsaber, but only one side can be activated at once. I don't remember which character it is necessarily, but it was a Sith, and one side was green and one side was red. It was a special kind of lightsaber in Legends. I don't entirely remember, but dude, those are some great answers, and I appreciate the thought that you put into them. And so, so like Caleb said, today we're going to be going through a roadmap through Star Wars Rebels, which is a Star Wars show that's set between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, following a cell of rebel, kind of just rebels that are starting out and rebelling against the Galactic Empire. And so if you're familiar with the podcast, I have a roadmap through Clone Wars, which is episodes 2 and 3 of the podcast. So I wanted to get Caleb on and talk about Rebels because he knows a lot more about Rebels. I think he has a much more in-depth understanding of the show as a whole than I do. So figured I would enroll his help with this particular episode. So without further ado, let's dive into ARC Trooper training.
Gentlemen, who wants to be an ARC Trooper? I do, sir.
Alrighty. So Caleb, could you run us through your various like tiers and rankings for each of these episodes, and like what all are you going to be talking about when you go into them?
So the way that I did this is it's very similar to what you did with Roadmap for Clone Wars. I think my terminology is a little bit different, but it's basically the same idea. I have three categories. The first is required episodes, episodes that you simply must watch in order to have a full understanding of Rebels and even the Star Wars universe as a whole. The next up is recommended, and basically these episodes are episodes that, even though they aren't necessarily required in order to understand Rebels, they are either really good episodes or episodes that like help you appreciate Rebels more. Like maybe it'll feature like the introduction of a new minor character, or like it'll help develop characters in a way that's interesting, or you'll like see characters in situations where it's just like, oh, this is fun. And then optional episodes are just episodes that I don't believe like contribute too much to the series as a whole. I think they're still good. Oftentimes they can still be entertaining, good, fun episodes. But if you really want to like, if you're limited on time and you want to just like get through the story of Rebels, you probably don't need to watch these optional episodes.
Awesome. Yeah. And then you have different like classifications for them too. Yeah.
Yeah. The way that I like decide the rankings is using these little flags. I won't go into too much detail on them during the podcast, but if I remember correctly, you might be something that you post on the Instagram to like help people see it. Yeah, but there's going to be N, which is significant new characters, G, which is growth in characters or relationships between characters, C, which is cameos from the larger Star Wars universe, MR, which is minor progression of the Rebels storyline, SR, which is like a significant progression in the Rebels storyline, and then MS is like minor progression in Star Wars as a whole. It's like something that impacts not just Rebels, but everything else. Yeah. And then SS is like significantly progressive Star Wars, like
love it,
earth-shattering stuff.
Yes, sir. Okay, perfect. And yeah, awesome. So, and I think for you don't have any episodes that you leave out. Like for Clone Wars, I left a couple episodes out just because I think they're boring. But we're going through everything with Rebels. Yeah.
Yeah. So
awesome. Yeah. Okay, cool. And so there are 4 seasons of Rebels. We're going to go through all of them. And hope that y'all find this helpful. So we'll start out with episodes 1 and 2, which are parts 1 and 2 of Spark of Rebellion. What are your thoughts on this?
As is to be expected, the very first couple episodes of Rebels are definitely required. Yes. They introduce the entirety of the Ghost crew. They introduce the protagonist Ezra and his crew. They significant progression of the Rebels storyline, just because we get to see Ezra join the crew, and it's kind of just like their origin story. It also introduces several important characters that come up later, like Agent Callus on the Imperial side. So yes, sir. Definitely a must watch.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And I'm going to be going through my like very rudimentary roadmap as well. But I mean, I completely agree. I'm going to be deferring to you for the most part, though, Caleb. And also, I just like to establish that this is going to be very spoiler-free, obviously, because this is a tool to help people that haven't necessarily watched Rebels before. So if that's a concern of anybody listening, then fear not. But yeah, no, I completely agree. The first 2 are a must-do just for basic comprehension of the show as a whole. Yes. As for episode 3, Droids in Distress, what are your thoughts there?
I debated leaving this one as recommended, but at the end of the day, I ended up making it required because it's the first contact that the Ghost crew gets with the larger rebellion, which is like an important part of, the entire show. And then also it gives important backstory of a couple of characters that we didn't get established in the first couple episodes. So yeah, also required.
Most definitely. I put it as recommended just because of like certain cameos that happen in it, which are pretty fun. But no, I agree that it's definitely significant in the like the kind of the through line between the main Star Wars storyline with the Ghost crew and the storyline that we have going here.
Yes.
So yeah, no, I think that that's a very fair recommend or fair required. As far as Episode 4 is concerned, Fighter Flight. There we go.
This one, this is my first optional episode. I don't really think that it's like required. It doesn't really progress Rebels as a whole. The only thing that I think that it really does is it shows Ezra and Zeb being one of the members of the Ghost Crew. They don't get along very much at the beginning, and this is kind of like the start of them developing a friendship. And so that's really what you see in that episode. But other than that, the plot is not super critical.
Yeah, it's very much kind of a fluff or a filler, in my opinion. But yeah, no, you get some fun interactions with Zeb and Ezra, which I think is a fun part of the show, is their kind of dynamic. And so, yeah, and there are some callbacks to it down the line when they're talking about Melu runs and stuff like that. So, so if I didn't really even mention it in my roadmap, but I think that it's a good option, a solid optional. Episode 5, Rise of the Old Masters. What are your thoughts?
I've got this one as required. It shows Inquisitors in action for the first time. Those are the main villains of the first half of this show. So definitely a very important landmark episode. And you also see some pretty important developments in Kanan and Ezra's relationship. Kanan is the Jedi who's on the Ghost Crew, and it kind of becomes Ezra's mentor throughout the show. And so it's important to see how their relationship goes as well.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, yeah, that's about all that I have. You also, is this the episode where you get some cool callbacks to like Clone Wars and some prequel stuff? Yeah.
Yeah, there is a pretty neat cameo here in the callbacks to Clone Wars in this episode. So yes,
most definitely. Okay, cool.
Check it out.
Yeah, super interesting, and I agree, mandatory. I think that it's very important for the overall storyline. As far as episode 6 goes, which is called Breaking Ranks, what are your thoughts there?
I've got this one as recommended. It's kind of not super important to the storyline as a whole in Rebels, as far as I would say, but it does introduce a new character who comes up multiple times, and for that reason, I think it's important to like perhaps see it if you want to have the best understanding of Rebels as a whole. So yeah.
I have it as required only because I think that it provides some interesting insight into kind of the perspective of the Empire, which I don't think you get to see super often, which I personally enjoyed. But yeah, no, and also the reoccurring character is pretty important as well. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, that's very fair. Honestly, that might be another. I'm not going to say my roadmap is perfect, but
no, I mean, trust me.
One of the things I love about Rebels is how it really shows a lot more Empire. There's a lot more characters in the Empire instead of just like random evil people who have no personality.
Exactly. So. Admiral 1 and Admiral 2. It's like, you actually get some development for them, which is pretty fun. All right. Out of Darkness is episode 7, which I honestly don't remember super well. So I'm going to defer to you for most of this.
So hold on. Yeah, I've got this one down as required. The most significant reason for that is because it's the introduction of this character called Fulcrum, which becomes like super important to the series as a whole.
Yeah.
As for the overall plot, other than that, it's not a terribly important plot. It just shows some development between Hera and Sabine's relationship.
That's right.
But it's a good watch, but there are some important plot development in it.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I don't have thoughts on it because I honestly don't remember it all that well. But yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, Fulcrum's super important moving forward. So yeah, definitely must watch. Episode 8 is Empire Day. So yeah.
I've got this one as optional.
Okay.
It just shows like there's a little bit of stuff that you kind of get you start understanding like the Empire's presence on Lothal. They're really like, and this shows like a new TIE fighter that like motivates the Empire's occupation. And then Empire Day, I'm pretty sure it's a recurring thing. And so for those reasons, it kind of like shows a little bit of Rebel stuff, but overall it's not terribly important to the plot as a whole. So I have it as optional.
That's fair. And once again, these next couple I don't remember super well, so including the next one. So I trust your judgment, and I will move on now. Gathering Forces is at number 9. Yeah. Or sorry, I don't know if you're saying anything else.
Yeah, no, this one's kind of the same. Empire Day, Gathering Forces, just kind of like you could argue they're filler episodes that are optional. I remember this episode, if I'm remembering correctly, is an episode where Ezra has an experience with the Force, that grows his relationship, but overall, optional stuff.
Fair enough. Yeah. Path of the Jedi. This is one that I remember, and I think that this is pretty significant, but I'm excited to hear what you have to say about it.
Yes, definitely required.
Yes.
Very important to Rebels as a whole. Ezra makes huge steps in his path to be a Jedi in this episode.
Yeah.
I won't give away too much, but you should definitely check it out.
Most definitely. Yeah. And I think that's going to be a pretty common theme, is that the episodes that aren't quite as important will probably go into a little more detail, and the ones that are probably going to be left pretty ambiguous, just because we don't want to ruin any experiences for anybody. But
sure.
Okay, episodes 11 is Idiot's Array, which also has an interesting cameo, but I'll wait to see what you have to say before I talk about that.
Yes, this has a great cameo. Definitely an episode that I really think is a really good episode, but sticking to my idea of like, you need to like, this roadmap is designed for people to just like get through Rebels. You don't need this episode for the story of Rebels as a whole, and for that reason, I put it as optional. But like, if you have the time to, definitely watch this episode. It contains a great cameo, and it's a good time.
Most definitely, yeah. And there's a lot of these cool little like, because what I find interesting about Rebels is that it's very different from Clone Wars in the sense that Clone Wars is like a collection of a bunch of separate stories, which could span 1 episode or 4 episodes, but they're very contained to that arc that they're a part of. Whereas with Rebels, it's one continuous storyline where you're keeping, it's kind of like Bad Batch almost, where you're staying with one core cast of characters and you're seeing them progress rather than seeing like a bunch of different perspectives about a given conflict, like within the Clone Wars. So I think that it's really smart that you've kind of like broken it up into the system where you mark which episodes are most important for the progression of the overall Rebels storyline, which I appreciate, because I don't think I would have thought to do that. But next up, we got episode 12 of season 1, which is Vision of Hope. So
originally, as you remember, I did not have this one as required, but then after I was thinking about it a little bit more and you were like telling me about why you disagreed, I actually ended up changing it to required, because there's like a really long plot line in season 1 revolving around this character named Gul Travis. And this is kind of like the conclusion of that plot line. And so it's a really great like development growth for the whole crew, and it really like ties up some loose ends that you were probably following if you were watching the rest of the season.
Most definitely. Yeah. And I remember that little conversation that we had, and I'm glad, because like whenever I was making my like quick little roadmap, I just literally went through Disney Plus. I was like, I remember this episode, I remember this one, I don't remember this one, don't remember this one. And this was one that I was like, I feel like it's important, but I just could not for the life of me remember what it was. And so I actually rewatched it with my brother, and we were like, oh yeah, that's pretty important, especially just for tying up some loose ends, like you said. So yeah, no, definitely a must watch there. Episode 13 is Call to Action. What do you have to say about that?
What you'll find about the Rebels is, no matter what the middle of the season is like, the ending is just as important as the beginning. And so these last 3 episodes are all required. They're kind of like, the way I have it here on my roadmap is it grows the story of rebellion on Lothal, and the stakes are raised on the Ghost Crew. That's how it is in episode 13. So basically, a huge part of Rebels episode, or as the Rebels story as a whole, goes on in these 3 episodes, and it definitely is super required to watch all of these. I think that's true of Call to Action, and then the next one, Rebel Resolve, and the next one, Fire Across the Galaxy.
Yeah. And I don't think that we need to say too much else, because like I said, like the ones that are super important, we're probably going to leave the most ambiguous, just because
I agree.
We don't want to give anything away. So I completely agree that, pretty much the bookends of all these seasons are going to be required, be it the beginning or the end. So I think that that's very solid. The end of season 1 is really special, and I really, really like it. So, but moving on to season 2. So the first two episodes are
yes.
parts 1 and 2 of the Siege of Lothal, which they're pretty sick episodes. So what do you have to say about them?
Absolutely. Contains vital interactions. I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say this. I think we agreed this last time.
Yeah.
Ahsoka is like a major part of this series, and this is kind of like one of the first episodes that we really get to see her in action. And so her stuff in this show is super important to the Star Wars universe as a whole. And also this episode features Darth Vader, so it's really an amazing episode, and it's amazing so 2 episodes. So
yeah,
definitely check them out.
Most definitely. And I just a little side note about Ahsoka. I remember I watched this show as it came out. At least the first 3 seasons. I think I kind of fell off watching it around then, and then I picked back up whenever it came out on Disney Plus. But it was shocking that Ahsoka was in this show, and it was such a fun reveal for me. But yeah, no, I feel like after it's been out, like people know. So, but yeah, no. First 2 episodes, fantastic. Next 2 episodes are also pretty fantastic. They're not part 1 and 2, but they're connected. So they're The Lost Commanders and Relics of the Old Republic, Season 2, Episodes 3 and 4. So what do you have to say about them?
These 2 episodes also feature cameo of great Clone Wars characters. Rex makes his appearance. He becomes a pretty major part of this show as well. And so it's a very important episode to really see his origin story. So both of these episodes certainly required. Oh
yeah. And as a Clone Wars geek, I mean, there's nothing better than these episodes in my opinion. I just think they're fantastic. So yeah, not too much else to say there. Episode 5 is Always Two There Are. What do you have to say about that?
I have this one as required, mainly because it is the introduction of the new Inquisitors that start appearing in this season. And so we really want to see them in action and get familiar with them because they're recurring and all that. Yeah. So yes.
I completely agree. And yeah, no, the Inquisitors are super interesting, and there's something that's going to be pretty important in the new Kenobi show that's coming out too.
That is true.
So to get to see them in action in this show is rather interesting, and I think it would be helpful in appreciating them fully in that show. But yeah, no, the Inquisitors are super interesting, and I actually did an episode about them a few episodes back. I believe it's episode 79, could be wrong, 78 maybe. But yeah, no, I think that I also think it's required. That's cool. Brothers of the Broken Horn, episode 6 of season 2. I think we agreed that this is a fun episode, but not a super important episode. Yeah.
Yes. In the same vibe of episode 11 of season 1, this is one of the top tier cameos that you get in this show.
Yeah.
Great character from the Clone Wars. And so this is a great opportunity to see that in action. And so great cameo, highly recommend watching it. But as for the series, I would put it as optional.
Yes. Completely agree. But yeah, no, this specific character is one of the best. Well, one of my favorites, just in general. So, so yeah, highly recommend. But yeah, no, not super important in the grand scheme of things. Okay, Wings of the Master, episode 7 of season 2. What are your thoughts?
If I remember correctly, we have slightly different perspectives on this one. I put this one as recommended, and I think that you were saying that it's optional or not really worth watching. But the reason why I put it as recommended is, one, it's kind of like a big growth of Sabine, who is another member of the Ghost Crew. Or wait, no, that's not true. It's the Hera growing in that episode.
Yes,
sorry.
Next episode.
Very sorry.
No, you're good.
And also, it's the introduction of a Star Wars ship called the B-Wing. So it's kind of an interesting episode if you're kind of a nerd about the different starships that the Rebel Alliance uses. This episode really gives a lot of background into that process, what that looked like. And so it just shows a little bit of growth in the Star Wars universe as a whole with this whole B-Wing business. And it's a cool episode for Hera.
Most definitely. And this is another one that I kind of forgot about, just what it was about. So yeah, no, when you put it like that, yes, it is quite significant. Episode 8 is Blood Sisters. I really don't like this episode all that much, but I know that you have different thoughts. So
Yeah, I said that this was a recommended episode. It introduces Ketsu Onyo. I might be mispronouncing that, but it's one of Sabine's friends, and she comes back multiple times. And also, it's a episode that grows Sabine's character.
Yeah.
But that's why I have it as recommended. But I guess if you don't like it that much, then
I mean, I just don't like Ketsu's character all that much. That's my main beef with this episode. But yeah, she does come back, so it is pretty important to get introduced to her. Stealth Strike. This is a fun episode. I like it a lot. What are your thoughts?
This is a very fun episode. It shows one of the things that Rebels does, as I think you've heard me mention a little bit, is it really like introduces like all sorts of interesting new Imperial technology. Yeah. And this is an episode that features that. And also another great thing that happens in this episode is the relationship between Kanan and Rex. Just like, Kanan is a Jedi who survived Order 66. And so for obvious reasons, he kind of like doesn't like clones. Yeah. And so being able to see how like Kanan and Rex interact, because he saw clones like kill his master. So it's like really tough for him to like get along with the clone. So it's really fun to see how they grow in this episode.
I completely agree. And Order 60, Clone Wars, Order 66, all that is like right in my wheelhouse. I love Order 66 content, and this sort of like aftermath kind of mending the broken bonds is a super interesting thing. So I completely agree. I love this episode. The Future of the Force is the next one, and you brought I don't entirely remember. I remember you bringing something up that was more significant about this than I had remembered. So I'll let you talk about this.
Yeah, I have this one as optional, and the reason, but there are things worth watching in this episode for sure. It helps us see a little bit more of like the motivations of Inquisitors and like what their goals are. Yeah, in the large Star Wars universe. But it's also one of the few times in the season where we really get to see Ahsoka in action. Ahsoka, that's right. That's what it goes up against the Inquisitors, and so it's a great episode if you really like to see Ahsoka in action. But I have it as optional.
Yeah. No, that's right. That's what I was remembering. No, and I love Ahsoka, so most definitely would recommend watching that. Alrighty, next one is Legacy. What do you have to say?
Absolutely required.
Yes,
this
sir.
Is super important. There's another important character on Lothal. His name is Ryder. Is introduced. He becomes super important later in the series, and then also a huge part of Ezra's backstory. Is explained, and so it's a huge moment of growth for him. Yeah. So it's definitely a must-watch.
Awesome. Love it. Next one is A Princess on Lothal, which another awesome cameo. So what do you have to say?
I think about this episode similarly to I think about the other great cameo episodes that I've mentioned. And the reason I have this one as recommended instead of just optional like I did, it's one of those ones where I definitely think that it's a fun episode, but I have this one as recommended because it also, in addition to having a great cameo, it features growth by the character Ryder, who was just introduced in the previous episode. Yeah. So for these reasons, I have that one as recommended.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I agree. Next up, this next stretch of episodes, I mean,
these are bangers.
Until like 19. This is some good stuff. So episode 13, first kind of Mandalorian sort of interaction that we have in the show. It's called The Protector of Concord Dawn. What are your thoughts?
Yep. The introduction of several important Mandalorians talks a lot about the backstory of Jedi and Mandalorians. Shows how the Mandalorian subplot. One thing you'll find in Rebels, and this is kind of the start of it, is there's a lot of subplots. Like there's subplots on Ryloth, which is what we'll see soon, featuring like Hera, because Ryloth is Hera's home planet. And then there's Mandalorian subplots. And this is kind of like the start of all of those subplots. Yeah. And so those are all become like really important required episodes because they're all like a major part of Rebels. And so this is kind of the start of all those. And so hugely important episode, really good, and also really important to the story.
And it's cool that you mentioned that because kind of like what I was talking about, how this show is formatted differently than the Clone Wars, where instead of it's a bunch of isolated stories, it's one continuous. In that same vein, rather than having these big 4-episode arcs, it keeps I think that the flow of the show is super interesting because it keeps like circling back to these little subplots that you're talking about, where they keep planting seeds, and then eventually you have like a really cool resolution to them. But it's very like linear in its storytelling, where it's like okay, they go on this side quest, and then you get a call back to it, and then another call back, and then finally get a resolution, which I think is a really cool storytelling technique.
Yes.
And so yeah, no, super important. Love me some Mandalorian content.
Absolutely.
It's great stuff. Okay. Episode 14 is The Legends of the Lasat. Thoughts?
This one is also required. It's a huge episode for Zeb. His character grows a lot in this episode. So, because he is a Lasat alien, and this is called Legends of the Lasat, so that can be implied. But definitely required.
Yeah, totally. Very important stuff. The Call is episode 15, which is also pretty dang important. Yeah.
I would be crazy if I said that this one wasn't required.
Yeah.
It introduces these creatures called Purrgils. They become a significant part of the Rebel storyline later in this season. It's like these creatures, and so I don't want to give away too much about them, but they're very fascinating. So
yeah, they're really cool.
Yep.
And I think that's a great explanation of it. And then you kind of already talked about this, but episode 16 is Homecoming, which is our first kind of interaction with what you called the Ryloth subplot. So, yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. As with the beginning of the Mandalorian subplot, the beginning of this Ryloth subplot is required for many reasons. Has lots of Clone Wars cameos with characters, because there are like Ryloth episodes in Clone Wars. And so a lot of the characters in those episodes come back in these episodes, which is really cool to see.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yep, required.
Love it. The Honorable Ones is episode 17. This is one of my favorite episodes. It's really good.
This is one of my favorite episodes in Clone Wars. Not Clone Wars, Rebels. This is one of my favorite episodes in Rebels.
Yes, sir.
One major plotline development in... I don't know if I want to give any of this away, though. Basically, there's a really cool plotline involving the character that I mentioned at the beginning. His name is Agent Callus. Mm-hmm. And so, in that sense, like, there's the Agent Callus subplot. And this is the start of that subplot. And so,
it's so good. It's so good.
No,
I think that's enough. I think that's enough to say about that. The Shroud of Darkness in episode 18. Another fantastic episode.
Yeah. One thing that you find with season 2, the overall plot of season 2 is really centered around like the Rebel Alliance that the Ghost Crew are a part of is like looking for a home base.
Yes.
And this episode in Rebels has like significant growth in that search. And in addition, there's just so many other cool things that happen in this episode. Great cameos, great developments of the plot, stuff that happens on Lothal, stuff that happens with Ahsoka, so many things.
Could not agree more. The next episode, it's not my favorite, so I'll let you talk about it. Episode 19.
I have this one.
Yeah.
Go ahead. This one's called
you go for it.
This one's called the Forgotten Droid. I have it as recommended. Really for the sole reason that it introduces this new character. It's like so Chopper is like the droid of the Ghost Crew, and this new character AP5 is kind of like the C-3PO to Chopper's R2-D2.
Yeah.
And I really like AP5. I don't know. I think he's just kind of like goofy and like in this fun way, and he plays important roles in several episodes in the next couple seasons. Yeah. So I think it's important to be introduced to him, but like his existence is not like mandatory to Rebels. So definitely you don't have to watch it. It's just recommended for me.
Most definitely. And then my main issue is it's kind of the same as like the C-3PO and R2-D2 episodes of Clone Wars, where it's just like, we could be doing a lot of other things with our time right now. So that's my main gripe with it. But no, AP5 definitely does come into play down the line. So it would be important to at least get introduced to him. Episode 20 is The Mystery of Chopper Base, which kind of ties up the storyline that you were talking about the Rebels trying to find a base of operations. So what do you have to say about that?
That is true. This is like the kind of like resolution of that plot line. So that's super important to the entire plot line. So I have it as required. It also sets the stage for the climactic finale of this series. And man, we're not going to say much about those episodes. I'll tell you that. So
Yeah.
required.
Episodes. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that it's pretty important. Episodes 21 and 22 are parts 1 and 2 of Twilight of the Apprentice, which is they're my favorite episodes of this entire show.
Yeah.
I
have them.
Fantastic.
They are so good. I have them on my description on this roadmap that I've been referencing. The description I put here is there are no words for these episodes. So I guess I'll leave it at that.
Yes, sir. No, just watch them. Like that's all that needs to be said. They're so good. So good. And yeah, I think that no words is very appropriate.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Steps into Shadow parts 1 and 2 are the first 2 episodes of season 3. So what are your thoughts on those?
Continuing into that bookend ideology, this is the beginning of season 3, so it really sets the tone for the series. So it is required. It introduces a very important and, in my opinion, very fascinating character named Bendu, who is this individual who lives on this planet, and he's got this very strange relationship with the Force. And so it's really cool to see how Bendu like mentors Kanan and Ezra as they like grow throughout the series of this season.
Most definitely.
There's also great cameos, and also you see Ezra grow in like new ways in this episode as a result of what happened in the previous episode. So
most definitely.
Yeah.
No. And yeah, Bendu's a really interesting character. And I think that this show in general has a lot of really interesting like implications about the Force, especially ones that we see near the end of season 4. So yeah, no, this kind of starts on that like kind of mysterious, like, oh, what's going on here type vibe. And so yeah, definitely love that. Episode 3 is the Holocrons of Fate. So
I have this one as required. Obviously, this is another huge episode. It's at this point where I feel like it's safe to say, without, even though it's not really a spoiler because he like shows up on all the promotional material for Rebels, that Maul shows up in this show and becomes a very significant part of this season.
Yes.
And this is a huge development in Maul's story, this episode. So definitely required.
Most definitely. Completely agree. And I think that, all the lore about holocrons that kind of gets woven into this show is super interesting as well. So
it is fascinating.
Love that. The Antilles extraction. I think that I think that it's kind of interesting because once again, it's just a cool cameo from like the greater Star Wars mythos, Wedge Antilles being involved in this episode. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I have it as recommended just because. So, I've been talking, there are 3 other episodes that are kind of like this one in my mind, the ones from season 1 and 2, the ones that have really fun cameos.
Yeah.
And then the reason I have this one as recommended is just because like seeing like the creation of like an iconic Star Wars Rebel Alliance character, Antilles, is just like kind of cool in my mind and a little bit cooler than just optional. But honestly, if I really think about it, it's probably optional for
it is
the whole.
It's not super crucial to the main plot, but I agree. I think Wedge is a really interesting character that we don't know too much about just in general. But I do love it. And once again, it kind of provides that Imperial perspective, which I find rather fascinating. So yeah, no, I think that that's very appropriate. Hera's Heroes. We're circling back to Ryloth. What are your thoughts?
All right. Continuing the Ryloth episode arcs that go throughout the seasons, this is one of the required steps in that journey. So definitely go take a look at it. It's required.
Yes, sir.
So, yes.
Excellent. Episode 6 is The Last Battle. One of my favorites. I think that.
Oh yeah, me too.
Once again, as a Clone Wars geek, I love it. So
this is a good one.
Yeah.
This one, honestly, if you really think about Rebels, isn't really a required episode, but it is.
Yes.
Okay, it is.
Yeah.
This is like a huge like. On like a ideological, like philosophical standpoint, this is really like a super important episode in like the history of Star Wars as a whole, like the story of all of Star Wars.
Yes.
And so it's an amazing episode. I won't talk about it much.
Same. No. Yeah. It's just fantastic. Episode 7, Imperial Super Commandos, back to the Mandalorian storyline. So
absolutely.
yeah.
Back to the Mandalorian storyline, a lot of continuation of introduction of new characters, and development of other Mandalorians that was introduced in Rebels. So check it out.
Dope. Iron Squadron, maybe my least favorite episode in the entire series. So what do you have to say about that?
I've got it as optional. The only reason you really need to watch it is because it introduces the Iron Squadron, which is a reoccurring set of characters who don't end up doing too much, but they are they do exist, and so you may want to know about them. So it's an optional episode.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just, once again, I don't like the Iron Squadron all that much, so kind of like a Ketsu moment for me.
Yeah.
The Winkathu job.
Another optional one.
Very fun,
in my
though.
mind.
Yeah.
It's very fun, for sure.
Yeah.
But it has a great cameo from Clone Wars, so check it out if you want to have an entertaining time, but not required if you're trying to get through Rebels as quick as possible.
Agree. An Inside Man, very, very good episode.
Yes.
Yeah.
This continues the Agent Callus arc from the previous season, so it's pretty huge there, and so definitely required.
Yes, sir. I accidentally exited out of Rebels on Disney Plus, so now I am going back to where I was. Next episode is Visions and Voices, which I will shout out my podcast for a little bit, because this episode contains the main tagline for this episode, which is a desert planet with twin suns, which is spoken by Maul. I love this episode a lot. Once again, because of the prequel tie-ins. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
Yes. It's just a huge, as you were saying, just a huge episode for Ezra and Maul. Because Maul and Ezra have a pretty interesting relationship in this season. And so this is a huge development of that. And also, this is the episode where the Darksaber gets brought into Rebels. And so it's really important for Star Wars universe as a whole to really see how the Darksaber has been moving around in Star Wars history.
Completely agree. Great episode. Would highly recommend, or not highly recommend. I would require it.
Me too.
The next two, we kind of disagreed on this one originally. I remember. So Ghosts of Geonosis parts 1 and 2 are episodes 12 and 13 of season 3. I'll let you talk about them first, though.
Yeah, I really want to make these ones required because they really are great episodes, but I ended up leaving them as recommended because there's a whole bunch of really, honestly, I don't know what I was, maybe I should make them as required. There really is. These are, you know what? I think maybe the reason why I left these as recommended was just because I just felt bad because I was putting so many required ones.
I mean, that's the thing about this show is it's so short that especially in these last couple seasons, I think that you can be generous with your required episodes.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, honestly,
it's ultimately up to you. It's your roadmap.
Bro, I gotta go with required. These are great episodes. It shows, so Saw Gerrera from Rogue One. He gives really interesting perspectives to rebellion as a whole. Yeah. So he's a very interesting character because he really gives interesting perspectives about what it means to be a rebel. And also there's great Clone Wars prequels cameos in this episode, and you even see Rex grow a lot. So yeah. It's a really cool series of episodes.
Agree. And I really like, once again, any episodes with the prequel tie-ins. I love some prequel love. It's my favorite era. I would also say that it's required. So episode 14, I think that it's pretty
it's just another optional one. Yeah. I guess usually I go it's an AP5 episode. And then you're like, oh, okay. So I get it's just AP5 and Zeb. It's just that they're the main characters this episode, and they have a good time with this random subplot. So that's all I have to really say about that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, no, not super crucial to the plot as a whole, but it definitely happens. So the next two are pretty closely related. They're both pretty Sabine and Mandalore centric. So the Trials of
Yes.
the Dark Saber and then the Legacy of Mandalore, episodes 15 and 16 of season 3. I really enjoy these episodes.
These are great episodes.
Yeah.
Hugely impactful of the entire Star Wars universe because like it's a huge part of the history of Mandalore. It's a huge part of Sabine's growth, and it's a huge part of the Rebels storyline. So
Oh yeah.
watch it.
Yeah, love it. That's no more
Required,
needs to be
yes.
said. Through Imperial Eyes, another fantastic episode.
Yes, this is another great episode with Callus, and it also has cameos of characters. It has cameo from character from Clone Wars, and it's really interesting to see how that specific character has changed from the Clone Wars to Rebels. So great episode.
Most definitely. We do love it. Episode 18 is Secret Cargo, which has another interesting cameo. I would say that it's not quite, it wouldn't necessarily be as impactful on a casual fan, but it is still very interesting to see that kind of side. Like it connects Rebels to the greater Rebellion storyline. So what do you have to say?
For sure. I agree. This is a huge part of the development of the Star Wars universe as a whole, just because of the cameo that shows up and the history, the backstory that we get of that character. And also, one of the things that this episode has that I think is pretty important to the series as a whole is this ship, this TIE fighter called the TIE Defender.
Yes.
Becomes like it's a pretty important plot point as far as like the Empire's presence on Lothal goes.
Yeah.
So it's cool to see that, and also, so for that reason, I think it's required.
Most definitely. Yeah, no, I think it's, I think for all those reasons, I would agree with that. Double Agent Droid, AP5. That's about it.
Yeah. So this is kind of where I want to give my, like, maybe this is my hot take, or at least because I know that you don't necessarily agree with me on this, but the reason why, like, these episodes exist, like episode 19, this is an optional episode, by the way, just Chopper and AP5 goofing off. The reason why I think these episodes exist is, are they like the most significant, the most impactful, the coolest episodes? Well, no, they're not. But like if like Rebels was like nonstop, just like battering you with all of this like crazy cool mind bending whatever stuff, then it'd be like a lot. And so I think that it's really important that this series like gives you a little bit of like comedy relief in between all of these super important episodes. Yeah. Because like it appeals to people who like, you know, are just there for like, you know, casually watching something fun, and it makes the show a little bit less dense and a little bit more like appealing to everyone, and also just like it's fun. Like I like laugh out loud at the end of this episode.
That's fair.
It really is funny. So
this episode is pretty fun. I will say, as much as I like, and I think that my main issue with that format of like having these kind of little like more fun filler-ish type episodes is that like when it's a weekly release, it's like, oh well, that was nothing. Like, especially if we're waiting week to week. But if you're binging something, I think that I appreciated them a lot more when I was binging it rather than when I was watching it as it came out, because I got a little annoyed at that. But I completely agree.
That's fair, because I didn't watch these when they were getting released like you did. I only like watched them all like I think over quarantine or something. So
yeah, that's fair.
I definitely have a different perspective there.
Most definitely.
But moving on,
last 3 episodes are bangers. So episode 20 is Twin Sons. It's fantastic. I don't know how much else needs to be said.
I'm not going to say anything about it. I just have on my description, this is the episode of a lifetime.
It's so good. It's so good. It's so good. 0 Hour parts 1 and 2 are the last 2 episodes, 21 and 22. Also just fantastic.
Yes. I was really proud of my description here because I'm like so descriptive. A couple of episodes that changes the face of the rebellion, filled with intensity and tragedy. It's great.
Yes, sir. Dude, I love that. No, I think that captures it perfectly. And I think that we can move on by saying that those are just very much required, and watch them. For sure. Okay, the Heroes of Mandalore parts 1 and 2 are the first 2 episodes of season 4. Dude, this season is just, it's just there's not much that's gonna not be required, or at least heavily recommended. So, what are your thoughts on the Heroes of Mandalore?
This is kind of like the conclusion of the Rebels storyline or the Mandalorian Rebel line.
Yeah.
Man, I'm
You're
having
good.
words today, you know. This is the conclusion of the Mandalorian storyline in Star Wars Rebels, so
Yeah.
it's definitely something that you need to watch to get all that tied up, and it's also just really good episodes.
Most definitely. The next two are in the name of in the name of the rebellion, episodes 3 and 4. I think that I really like Saw Gerrera content. I think that, like you said, he
Me too.
provides a really interesting perspective, and you get some of that in these episodes. So, what do you have to say about that?
The only reason I have these as recommended is kind of what I was saying about the Saw Gerrera episodes last season, where it's just like, if I stick required on this episode, then like you're gonna end up watching the entirety of season 4 with my required episodes, basically. And so it's like,
which I think is fair. I mean,
yeah.
season 4 is really good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
But I have them as recommended, but I would never watch Rebels without watching these episodes because I love Saw and I love how this episode portrays him.
that's fair.
And
yeah, no, I completely agree. Episode 5 is The Occupation. I enjoy this episode quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a required episode. It kind of like sets up what the rest of season 4 is going to look like.
Yep.
And so it's required in that sense. And so watch it and
agree.
enjoy it.
Yeah, I love that kind of like heroes with the backs against the wall, forced to improvise on the spot type of vibe. I think that this episode has that in full effect. So episode 6 of season 4 is The Flight of the Defender. This is one of the only ones in this season that I would say isn't required personally, but I think that you might, there was some reason that you disagreed. So
the reason why I kind of agree with you that like if it weren't for one specific plot point, this would be an optional episode, but because it introduces like these mysterious wolves that live on the fall, that was the only thing that I was like, this has to be watched because you need to get that part. But
that's that makes so much sense. Episode 7 is Kindred.
Yeah, this is also required.
Yeah.
It's a huge display of like Hera and Kanan's relationship, so it's really cool to see them grow there. It shows a lot more with those wolves I just discussed, and it also introduces one of the antagonists of this season, this like bounty hunter named Rook, I believe is how you pronounce it. Yeah. So yes, that is that.
Yeah, no. Very, very interesting. And I mean, there's also, I'd say, a pretty big selling point of all this that we haven't even really touched on is that Grand Admiral Thrawn is kind of the main
Oh my
antagonist.
gosh, how have we not
mentioned Thrawn? I know. I just saw him on a thumbnail. I'm like, have we talked about Thrawn at all? I mean, he's such a fascinating antagonist for these last 2 seasons of Rebels. And I mean, I think that that's a selling point enough to kind of like get people into it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that if you asked, like, in that, like, beginning thing that you did with me of, like, asking for your favorite character, if you asked me what my favorite villain in Star Wars was, I would have to go with Thrawn. He's just
fantastic.
He's great in so many ways. Like, I can't,
Have you read any of the books? This is a side note, but
I haven't, no. I
think you'd like the books.
You should send me your favorite, and I will make time for it.
I mean, they're kind of a linear story, so they're not like they're not like individual, but I've heard that the original like legend ones are a little more interesting than the current canon ones, which is the ones that I've read. But we can talk about that more later.
Yes.
Crawler Commandeers is episode 8. I would say this is pretty optional, if not just yeah. But that's me.
Yeah. The only really thing you get out of this episode is it kind of shows how Lothal is like growing its rebellion, and also there's this character that shows up earlier in the show called Vizago, and it's really cool to see how Vizago and the crew of the Ghost start to work together a little bit more in this episode. But it's not really required for your understanding of Rebels, so I've got it as optional.
Yeah. And then, I mean, we hit the ground running. So I think we should talk about these next few episodes just in very general terms. So we got episodes 9 through 15, which are in order: Rebel Assault, Jedi Knight, Doom, Wolves and the Door, A World Between Worlds, A Fool's Hope, and Family Reunion and Farewell. These are, I mean, you got to watch all of them, yeah?
Yep. Straight required all the way through.
Yeah. and they're good. Like they're really good.
They're really good.
And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rebels ends on a high note, let me say. It's
Most
just
definitely.
really cool to see how it's one hugely connected plot, and it's really cool to see how all the characters come together and they complete this amazing finale that's filled with like emotional moments and epic moments, and so
Agree.
it's awesome.
Agree. And I just love it. I don't have words. I could talk about all these episodes for so long in a lot of depth, which maybe we can do sometime in the future. But yeah, no, I think that it's fantastic. I think that it's best left unsaid so that you could just experience it. So,
Amen.
Alrighty. So, do you have any final thoughts, or should we move on?
I guess just in conclusion, that is Rebels as a whole. I highly recommend watching it. As Jonah has mentioned, it's a very different storytelling style than Clone Wars, and it really lets you explore these really fascinating characters and also get some great extra Star Wars content along the way. So,
yeah,
watch this show. It's really good.
Most definitely. I do love Rebels, and I think that I've only grown in my appreciation for it as I've grown as a Star Wars fan. So
Nice.
yeah, man, dude, I really appreciate you. You've provided so much like insight that I would have never come to the table with this show. So I really appreciate you taking the time to do this twice. And so, yeah, this has been really fun. And this one of my favorite episodes that I've done, just conversation wise. So I really appreciate that.
Awesome.
But without further ado, let's dive into the rank of master.
You are on this council, but we do not grant you the rank of master.
Alrighty, so if you're new to the podcast, rank of master is basically just a quiz that I give to my guests. They start at the rank of youngling, they move up a rank each time they pass a quiz. The questions get harder and harder as you move up in ranks. And what I'm going to do today is, since this is my second time recording this episode with Caleb, he's already done this quiz, right? And so I'm going to give him, since he's been a great sport about this, he's come back on to re-record the same thing a second time. I'm going to say that he did pass and got from youngling to Padawan in the last quiz. So I'm just gonna save those questions for another quiz, and I'm going to allow him to stay at Padawan and try to go up to Knight this time.
All right, here we go.
Yeah. So I just as a little thank you for being patient with me, because it was literally 100% my fault why the last episode we didn't work, because my audio input was completely wrong. And Caleb's was completely fine, so it was all on me. And it's one time I don't do a sound check before an episode. I was like, it's probably fine, and then it was not fine. No. But it is what it is. So basically, I'm going to give you 3 questions. They have ambiguous point values. I mainly go off of vibes. And if you need any context or anything, you can ask. I may or may not give it. And if you don't know the answer to something, I heavily recommend my guests to kind of talk about any Star Wars topics that they think are adjacent to whatever I'm asking, to kind of just show that they have a general knowledge, but they may not know that specific answer, so that I'm at least catering to different kinds of Star Wars fans, because I know that not everyone knows the same kinds of things. So, Caleb, Are you ready?
I am ready.
Excellent. So, question number 1. What animals do the rebels ride on the ice planet of Hoth? They kind of look like goats almost.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. The things that Luke gets stuffed inside of to stay warm.
Yeah.
I'm forgetting what they're called though. Are they like tauntauns?
That is correct. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Well done. Alrighty. So you are 1 for 1 going into question number 2. Question number 2 is, what is the name of the planet that housed the cloning facilities responsible for producing those used in the Grand Army of the Republic?
That would be Camino.
That is correct. Yes, the water world of Camino. Okay, 2 for 2 going into question number 3. You're going strong. And I have 2. So this one has 2 answers to it. You're responding with two different things. So what are 2 species that are typically impervious to Jedi mind tricks? And I have 2 that are on here, but you could technically give me another one that works.
Are the Hutts impervious to mind tricks?
That is one. Yes.
Okay, good. And let's see. Let me think. Whatever that species that the slave master on Tatooine that has Annie, is his species immune? I can't remember what that species is called.
They are immune. So that's the second one that I have.
Okay.
Do you remember anything else about them? Like they're in the Clone Wars as well. So do you have any other knowledge about them as a species, or could you describe him to me, perhaps?
Well, they're like the small flying creatures. They're not Geonosians, are they?
They're not. No, Geonosians are a little more insectoid, where these are a little
primitive.
more like reptilian. Yeah. But if you don't have anything, that's fine. I feel
that's all really I got. I can't remember what they're called.
They are called Toydarians.
Oh man,
I'm Toydarian. Jedi mind tricks don't work on me. Only money. It's like it's a little, it's certainly something.
They do show up.
So King Katunko and all that show up in the Clone Wars as well as a neutral world that end up joining the Republic. So you went 2.5 out of 3, which I think is solid enough to get you to the rank of knight. So congratulations. How do you feel?
I feel really good. I'm a little bit worried about the next time I come up on here because I was really pushing it this episode as far as my knowledge went. Took me a second to remember what those things were called.
It's all good. And I mean,
we'll see how it goes.
And the thing with the rank of master is that I have like a running list of just questions that I think are good. And I number all the questions and I put them into a random number generator and I choose 3 numbers. And those are the questions that my guests get. And so the only one that's gotten the rank of master so far is my brother Jeb. But I do that to keep it fair because I handpick all the other questions. But I mean, I find it only fair to keep it impartial in that regard. So congratulations, you have moved up to the next rank. You have joined a very prestigious collection of knights on this channel so far. And happy to see it. So with that said, this wouldn't be a proper episode if I didn't leave you with just a little bit more. Alrighty, so I'm going to do the same more that we did for the last one, Caleb. So Kanan Jarrus, also known as Caleb Doom, is one of the main characters in Star Wars Rebels. He's one of the core members of the Ghost Squadron or the Ghost Crew. He was a Order 66 survivor. His Jedi master was a Jedi named Depa Billaba, and her master was Mace Windu, who's my favorite character. So had to throw in Mace where I could. And so, Kanan is basically the grand apprentice. Or no, Mace Windu's the grand master. That's not right. I don't know what I'm saying. But it's like, Kanan comes from a great line of Jedi is what I'm trying to say. And I just think that's a cool little tidbit. Caleb, any final thoughts before we close this up here?
Well, just saying, Jonah, you did a great job. You really do a great thing creating this Star Wars podcast accessible for everyone to really appreciate Star Wars content. And I'm really thankful that you had me. So thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Dude, this was really fun. And I'll definitely have you on in the future because you're a fantastic guest and you know what you're talking about, which I really appreciate. So this was super fun. Appreciate you doing this a second time. And that said, awesome. Follow us on Instagram, subscribe on YouTube, all the things. Follow us on streaming platforms, all Twin Sun Talks. You've taken your first steps into a larger world. May the Force be with you, and I will see y'all in the next episode. Bye, friends.